Hi there, Joel from Jonesy's, and we finished another diesel Suburban. You saw part one of this build. This one is now called the Battle Wagon. Here's the full detail on the build next. All right, guys, we're going to give you the full overview of the Battle Wagon, but before we do that, I would just want to make a disclaimer. This is not a sponsored video in any way. I'm going to be talking a lot about a lot of vendors, and that is for your benefit. If you are building one of these things, you can duplicate my build using the same vendors that I have. They are not sponsored. We had to pay for all of the stuff that we feature in this stuff. And the last thing that I'm going to say about it is if you need some parts or pieces for this, check out adventurevehiclesnorthwest.com and we'll hook you up with as many of the parts that we manufacture as we can. Let's talk about bumpers. So if you guys have watched the channel before, almost every single one of these builds that I do, I use move bumpers, and this was no different. And the one thing that I love about the move bumpers is that we can customize it. So for the front bumper, we started with their classic series and we modified the heck out of it. So as you can see, we have a Badland Harbor Freight winch, and they do not offer provisions for a winch on their classic series, so we modified this one so that we could add the winch. We also added in a front receiver hitch, and that receiver hitch ties all the way back to the factory cross member. So we've tied in the center section, and again, you're not going to be towing a trailer with this thing, but the customer thought it would be pretty cool to be able to mount a front bike rack on it. We got inspiration for mounting this winch in here from a hidden winch style mount. And so we went to the drawing board, utilized the license plate cutout, mounted the winch back in behind the bumper, and there you go. You have a winch. Decided to go with the full grill guard to protect, and I think it just looks awesome on this rig. It doesn't stick out too far, it doesn't stick out too high. It's not terrible to work on. You can lean over it, so I think we absolutely nailed it on this bumper. For the rear bumper, again, went with Move, their classic series, and then we added on all of this spare tire rack as well as the other accessories. So let's start over here with the latch. Latch came from Rough Stuff, and then we fabricated and modified the polyurethane rear mount. Have the safety hook here, so that comes undone. Pop this open and it'll swing out. And then if you come over here, you can check out our hinge. Now this hinge, the hinge is a double shear unit from 4x Innovations, and it also has this nice stainless steel skid plate here for the release pin, and it has two locking spots. So this tire rack will swing open, lock in position, and then you can lift that and slide it back. So it comes and swings open. Now, this is a lot of weight and a lot of stuff going on over here. That's why we wanted to go with the double shear style 4x Innovations hinge. Highly recommend those. They're really well built. So in the middle of the bumper, you can see we've got our 7-way trailer connector. We have a rear Anderson connector here as well, so that you can use this to power a winch on your trailer, jumper cables to somebody in the rear of your vehicle, or you could even jump your own vehicle from the rear there as well. Also added in another air coupler, and then Move also supplied the auxiliary reverse lights that we flush mounted in the bumper itself. So as far as lights, we decked this thing out with all kinds of lights because, as you can see, the factory OEM square body lights are very anemic. The black oak style lights, which we have the beam here. We also have the floods here, or the fogs here. Those are the infrared lights. So when this thing goes in blackout mode, you can flip those on and he's got infrared lights. Move supplied us with these other pod lights in here. And then obviously up on top of the baseline Overland rack, we've got the full old school style KC lights up there. So final accessories on the front bumper. Here you can see we have the Anderson connector for front main battery power. And then over here, we also have our quick coupler for onboard air. So you can pump up a tire, you could pump up an inner tube, air mattress, whatever you want from the front. So the customer did all the research, and he had Bilstein Overland send us this roof rack. It is hands down, without question, the best roof rack you can get for a square body. It fits perfectly. It's not humongous in terms of height. It's made out of aluminum. Highly recommend Bilstein Overland rack. So if you're gonna put a rack on a Suburban, just buy it from them. It's a great rack. Okay, now moving on to the interior. This is something that we kind of went over the top on the interior, and I'm excited to show you guys what we did. The customer had some very specific requirements for the interior. Specifically, he's got small kids, and he wanted the ability to have modern style car seat latches and things like that. So for the rear seat as well as the middle seats, we utilized later model 2007 and up Escalade captain's chairs. We were able to re-web the seat belt. So these are actually the original square body female portions. So the factory square body shoulder harnesses function. And then because these came out of the middle row of a Suburban or Escalade, these ones Escalade specifically, the fold function is great, so you have easy access to the back. So a little bit of details on what we did here. This is the original mounting plate from the Escalade, and then we welded on an adapter plate right here that bolts in there, and then added additional mounts there. So seat is secured with heavy duty grade 8 hardware, and it fits in here just like it was designed. Now for the back seat, again, we used the third row rear seat out of the Escalade, and I fabricated an adapter plate here that utilizes the OEM style mounting point. So these are completely removable, they fold, they tip forward just like they would in the later model Escalade. Now, one of the problems that we ran into with trying to make all of these Escalade seats work is how to match the front seats. So let's go take a look at the front seats, and I'll show you what we did there. So these front seats are the factory original GM square body seats. Originally they were gray vinyl, and we wanted them to match the Escalade seats the best that we could. So we had B&R Upholstery, Barry at B&R Upholstery. He did an awesome job. He redid these in premium leather with the center section being perforated so that it matches the rear Escalade style. And then he also duplicated the French seam and the stitching. So at first glance, these seats look like they are Escalade seats, and they match the rears really, really well. In addition to making them look like the Escalade seats, we also wanted them to have a little bit of creature comforts, so we added in a seat heater. These switches will be terminated in a custom center console that we're still working on. If anybody says that these vehicles are done, they're lying to you. These vehicles are never done. There's always something that needs to be worked on. There's always something that can be improved. Center console is one of those things. So this rig has a lot of accessories, and in order to make all of the switching work correctly, we needed an auxiliary switch panel, and the customer really wanted the old school style heavy clunk regular rocker switches. And so we designed and built this custom switch panel that fits right where the original radio setup is. So this gives him all of his functions. The grid heat is a momentary, so if he needs grid heat, he just holds that down with the key on, and the grid heat solenoids will engage. This is for the onboard air compressor. So we did industry standard, meaning up is on, down is off, so everything down is off. And then obviously you can see front locker, rear locker, infrared flood, beam, fog, light bar. This one over here is specific to the night vision setup. So if you flip that down, that means that the brake lights have been killed. So brake lights are off. So brake lights on, brake lights are off. Okay, as far as gauges, we went with new vintage, and you can see we don't have the instrument actual bezel on. That's because we're having some difficulties and some troubleshooting problems with the speedometer calibration. But the reason we went with new vintage was because they make a tachometer that is adjustable and can pick up the signal directly from the alternator. So
Say that again.
in addition, New Vintage makes matching boost and EGT gauges, and we just mounted those directly underneath of that switch panel. As far as the Cummins diesel engine, we sourced a 1992 VE pump intercooled Dodge. That gave up its heart to live on in the square body. Some of the engine mods that we did, we put head studs, we ran a fluid dampener, we also upgraded the valve springs and went with Oregon cam grinding with their performance style 12 valve regrind on the camshaft. As far as a turbocharger, we contacted Bell Turbo. Bell Turbo supplied us with an HX37. It spools very quickly, it sounds great, and makes a lot of power. They worked with Pacific Fuel Injection to calibrate the pump and injectors for this build. For a braking system, to supply the power brakes, we installed a Hydro Boost system that is fed from our direct mount power steering pump adapter. As far as the clutch, we retained the factory style GM square body hydraulic clutch setup. That goes down to a Dodge slave cylinder. As far as air conditioning, we retained the front and rear air conditioning unit that was factory on the square body, and it is fed through our high mount AC compressor, which is up here. We were able to source this pre-bent tube from Old Air Products that allowed us to retain the factory style air conditioning line here. We recrimped on this. Sorry, that's not the cleanest way to describe that, but we'll give you a good picture so you guys can see exactly how we hooked up the compressor. This is a Gen 1 style compressor. If you look at our website and you want to order this setup for yours, this is a Gen 1, and it has the very conversion friendly fittings on the back to connect up to your AC lines. As far as an air conditioning condenser, we went with Vintage Air's largest supercooler condenser that they sell so that it can provide enough cooling capacity to the rear AC unit. Now, as it stands right now, because we're still troubleshooting, we're still running this thing through its paces, we do not have a fan. We're running the Gen 1, which is 89 to 93 Dodge fan hub and pulley. We're able to run the factory Dodge mechanical fan. We did, however, build a custom fan shroud. This radiator is just an aftermarket radiator that is sized appropriately for the space and fits between the outlets of the Gen 1 Dodge intercooler. So pretty much because our donor vehicle was a Gen 1, that's what we retained for a lot of these components. Now we're going to talk about electrical. So the basics for our electrical is we have two AGM style batteries. Those batteries are charged with a AC Delco alternator, and that actually runs our tach. And so batteries, the electrical system on this build got pretty complicated pretty quickly. And so to try and minimize some of the confusion, we isolated the factory harness, meaning the factory square body harness, with all the accessories. So we added in an auxiliary fuse block that has 4 relays for the fans, as well as all of our extra circuits that we added in. Seat heaters, exhaust brake, radio, light bars, all of that stuff is wired separately from the factory GM harness. To provide power to our front jumper cable hookup or our Anderson connectors in the front and rear bumper, we utilized military style top posts. We ordered the batteries for dual post because, man, this thing started to get battery cables like crazy. And then we installed an isolation switch directly here so that you can kill the power to those front and rear connectors. Those front and rear connectors, as well as the winch, are also protected through big mega fuses down here. Again, sticking with the Gen 1 Dodge theme, we mounted the Gen 1 Dodge grid heat relays right there. Solenoids, some people call them solenoids. Those run through cables to the grid heat. The grid heat here is controlled through a switch panel in the dash. Our customer sent us a Ford Dana 60 Kingpin driver's side drop high pinion axle, probably the best axle you could possibly have for this. And the reason we wanted to go with a driver's side drop was so that we could get the front drive line away from the exhaust, which gave us a lot more room to run that full 4-inch exhaust. As for exhaust, we started out with a diamond eye kit for, again, the Gen 1 Dodge. And then for our suspension lift, again, Alcan supplied us with the springs, and we spec'd out a shackle flip kit from Off-Road Design, and we used all of the Off-Road Design bushings as well as their greasable bolts. So as for the front axle, we reconfigured this so that it would essentially match the Chevy square body Dana 60. To make it match the Dana 60 out of a Chevy, we changed the upper steering arm as well as added in some lower shock mounts that mimic the Dana 60 in the Chevy. So steering linkage, we went with Off-Road Design. They provided us with this drop pitman arm and goes into the Chevrolet style Dana 60 upper steering link. Here you guys can see we fabricated this lower shock mount that mimics the Chevrolet style square body mount. As far as springs and suspension and shocks, we went with Bilstein shocks, and we had custom springs made by Alcan Springs. And I gotta say, they are awesome for this. We added some capacity to the front. We also added some capacity to the rear, and they ride and perform flawlessly. So double thumbs up to Alcan Springs. We outfitted both axles with air lockers, as well as heavy-duty diff covers from Rough Stuff. We outfitted the rear with a pinion guard, again from Rough Stuff, and we also installed Eldorado-style brake calipers with the integrated emergency brake. Lastly, you can see we have the 51 series Bilsteins. We welded on the lower shock tab so that we could retain the upper. For the transmission, we went with the NV4500. We had Zimbrota drivetrain build us a NV4500 with complete Dodge style, with the updated main shaft as well as the 5th gear retaining nut. We married that to a Atlas transfer case so that we could run twin sticks and have a good low range. Out of our compressor, we plumbed down to this main storage tank, and on the main storage tank we have a drain valve here, and then because this pack brake tank has so many outlets on it, we have this one here that runs back to the rear bumper, and then we have our two ARB air locker solenoids here and here. And we swapped all of these over to the GM Delphi weather pack style connections. And so basically everything comes into this tank and then everything goes out from this tank. So for the exhaust brake, we come out of the air tank right here and we come over into the control solenoid. This control solenoid is hooked to a toggle switch on the shifter. Out of the control solenoid, we come over to the actuation cylinder on the exhaust brake. Now, for the exhaust brake, this is a universal pack brake. we were able to come off of the turbo with a full 4-inch exhaust down into the exhaust brake. And when you're mounting these universal style exhaust brakes, you want to have them as close to the turbo outlet as possible. Here you guys can see we mounted this one with the actuation cylinder right next to the transmission. Well, that's going to wrap up the walk around of the Battle Wagon. My client wasted no time taking it out and getting some wonderful landscapes. This is kind of an overlanding rig to be set up. Here you can see it with the awning and him setting up camp. And he wasted no time loading it up with his kids in the back seat next to those car seats and letting them crawl all over the new Battle Wagon. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and check out all of the products at adventurevehiclesnorthwest.com.